So the title of the presentation was really obvious to me because after more than a decade in federal government, every time I went to a different job, everybody said, don't unpack your stuff. And for those of you who have moved from one job to another or gone up the chain, this might sound familiar to you. Every time I was in a position, there was always a reorg or a change of offices in the building or a change from one building to another. I'm not sure how it works across the nation for you guys, but I'm in Washington, D.C., and there's a change all the time. So I thought, you know, here we are changing again. The difference is that this is change on such a large scale. This is change like we've never seen before. This is unprecedented change. So it's change, but kind of change to the max. So go ahead and let's go to the next slide. And it's just a welcome slide.
Yes.
And so I just want to thank you guys for inviting me. And we can go to the next slide. Reply all is my comic strip. And on the next slide, it is a spoiler alert that this may be a helpful presentation. But if you go to the next slide, I'm going to give you a suggestion. And the suggestion is that you think of this presentation as being a helpful presentation. And basically, this is the takeaway. For those of you who want to leave now and you don't even want to stay for the rest of the presentation, this is the takeaway. The takeaway is that transitioning is hard. We all know that change is hard. We've heard it our whole entire lives. There used to be those books about who moved my cheese and all that kind of stuff. Everything about transitioning or changing is difficult, but everything about change is better and more satisfying if you think of it in terms of let's make this better and more satisfying. Let's make this more suited to our needs. Let's make this more successful for everybody. If you think of this transition in those terms, then it's more likely to turn out that way. So that's it. That's the takeaway. That's the end of the presentation. But if you want to hang in there for a little while, I've got some cartoons. So let's keep going. Let's go to the next slide. There's a little bit about me, and I guess you already heard about me, so we don't really have to talk about that. I will just send an invitation out for any of you who are interested in cartooning, or if you have a child who's interested in cartooning, just chat me up later, ping me, reach out to me. I'm always happy to talk with anybody who's interested in that. And let you know what to do, where to find some resources, how to do it. I'm especially good at talking to people about how to balance a creative life with a full-time career. And now I'm learning how to balance a creative life with trying to retire. So look me up. I'll give you information for contacting me at the end. Let's go on to the next slide. Okay, our goals for today are to acknowledge what we've experienced, assess what we've learned, appreciate what we're taking forward, and then apply that knowledge to the new transition. So let's go on to the next slide. And let's just acknowledge that, I mean, it's kind of obvious what we went through, but I think that it's helpful to just take a moment and acknowledge that it was so extreme. It was more than extreme. It was beyond extreme. It was so extreme that a lot of us got lost in the challenges of just keeping our heads above water. A lot of us got lost in the challenges of just keeping everything going. And it's helpful to stop and think about the fact that what we've all come through is really amazing. And what we've all come through, even though it's not really over yet, it really has been immense, and everybody else has gone through it too. You didn't go through this alone. I understand that it feels like you went through it alone. I know that I feel like I went through it alone. I feel like nobody had my experience, but everybody had an experience, and it was huge for everybody. Next slide, please.
Yes.
The change was sudden, and the events were beyond what was unexpected. It was unimaginable. There was no warning. It's important to really realize the impact of something that comes on so suddenly. I think it's funny that all of a sudden everybody in my family knows the word precedent. Everybody says, there was no precedent for this. And I'm like, congratulations, finally, you understand the word precedent. You're correct. There was no precedent for this. There was no opportunity to prepare. And that catches people really off guard, especially where it was so extreme, so overnight. Next slide, please. There was no map, there were no guidelines. All of a sudden, things just weren't the way they were. Kids were not in school. Some of us couldn't visit our parents. Some of us couldn't visit our parents for a long time, even a year. Obviously, for all of us, the work environment changed overnight. Next slide, please. Everything just seemed to change. And if you go to the next slide, it'll show you just a whole array of what was going on. There were so many emotions all at once. There were conflicting emotions. There were positive emotions and there were negative emotions. They were all at once. Some of the emotions were positive, some negative, some unfamiliar, some familiar. Some emotions were unidentifiable or misidentified. A lot of the emotions were very raw. A lot of them were really hard to feel. Next slide.
Yes.
But it's important to understand that having all of those emotions, even if they were conflicting, even if they were extreme, even if you couldn't identify them, even if you misidentified them, that was reasonable. That's a reasonable thing to go through when such extreme events are occurring globally. And it's also important to realize that everybody was overwhelmed with emotions. Next slide, please. So that was all the bad news. So we figured that out. We put the bad news behind us. Let's move on. And the good news is that we figured it out. And the reason we figured it out, next slide, please, is because we had to. We had to figure it out. We really didn't have any options. The kids had to go to school. We needed to figure out how to take care of our parents. We needed to earn our paychecks. My car was still making a noise that had to be fixed. I mean, there was no getting around that. So let's move forward to the next slide and let's take a look at what we learned. One of the things that we learned is that we're flexible. Are we all on the Johnson file slide?
Yes.
All righty. All right. This is just a joke from my old law firm.
Well, and you know, that might work.
Really
We're transitioning right now to a new file system, an electronic file system, and we're going through naming conventions and have had many struggles trying to figure out how to have a universal naming convention across all of our 10 NASA centers. And so, you know what, I think personally that resonates with us. There are days when it really would have felt nice to just call everything the Johnson file. So that cartoon really hits home for us.
I am like the queen of uniformity when it comes to file naming conventions. At every office I've ever gone to, starting when I was in the private sector and continuing through all of my offices in the federal government, I have always initiated the project of let's get a naming system, and it never worked. It absolutely never works. So good luck to you. Good luck with that. Let me know how it goes. I will be happy to see it if you are able to do it. Good luck. Next slide. We also learned that we're resilient. Even though it was very upsetting, even though we cried a lot and had anxiety attacks, you know, some people, this is maybe a lot of people had their first anxiety attacks. A lot of people had never had an anxiety attack. And all of a sudden, they were having what they thought were heart attacks, but it wasn't a heart attack. It was an anxiety attack, and they're awful. And that's what it feels like. And a lot of people walked around saying, what if, a million times a day? What if this? What if that? What if this? What if that? And yet, we still got our work done every day. We still woke up, turned on our computers, logged in, got to our 7, 8 a.m., 9 a.m. meetings. We all figured out those office hacks. We figured out our home system. We figured out all those computer programs, excuse me, all those computer programs that have always been sitting on our computer that, like, we knew we had them, but we really didn't know what, services they provided, but we figured them out. We got help with them. All of a sudden, I remember I took a bunch of those online tutorials, and I thought now would be a good time to figure out how to use this. All of a sudden, a lot of people figured out share drives. I've been using share drives forever, and I've been sharing documents with other people to work on forever. But a lot of other people caught up, thank God. I'm really happy about that. So I was happy about people working at home because it was like an overnight forcing of people to get with it and evolve and move up to the 21st century and really get modern in their technology. I personally was pleased about that. But everybody eventually had to evolve in terms of their technology and all that. Some people are still evolving. And then the nice thing is that the offices are evolving. The offices are saying, how can we make this more streamlined? How can we make this faster and better? Next slide. And we also realized how knowledgeable we are. One of the nice things about working at home was that, for me, I realized how much I knew. There was so much when I was in the office all the time that I just turned over to other people. Like when I needed to understand something about records management, I always went to the guy down the hall. But it turned out that when I was at home, I was like, you know what, I can figure out the answer to this. I know it's on that share drive somewhere, in that folder somewhere. Let me just find it. Or I would look it up in my email. I got really good at searching emails because I knew the answers were in my emails. And I realized that actually I knew the answers to a lot of my questions. But when I was at the office, I don't want to say that I was lazy, but I was lazy. And I would just rely on a lot of people for stuff that I could do myself. But when I was at home, it was easier just to do it myself because I didn't realize when I was at the office, but it was a lot of work actually to walk down the hall and help the other guy. It was actually easier at home just to figure it out for myself. So it was nice kind of to realize how knowledgeable I was. Next slide. The best thing about being at home was realizing what a skilled communicator I was and what skilled communicators everybody else was. It was really ironic because at home, we all learned, I think, and I noticed this with my colleagues, we realized how to use emails, how to use text, how to use Zoom, how to use the phone, and like when each thing was the most effective means of communicating. And I think that was really priceless. I think when we were in the office full-time before, I think we used the wrong means of communications kind of in a haphazard way all over the place. I think people texted when they really, or used Messenger, whatever you use, when they really needed to use an email or pick up the phone or walk down the hall. I think people talked in the corridor or the bathroom when they really needed to sit down in a meeting. I think that people just didn't think very clearly about how do we need to communicate this next conversation. And when we got home and had to work from home and had to really rely on our communications, I think all of us, I'm assuming this was not just the team that I work with, I think we had to really think about, okay, we need to go over a document, we need to look at some drafts, we need to have a meeting and figure out next steps, we need to see where we are, we need to talk about a line in a contract. How should we do that? And, you know, there's always the question of, is it going to be discoverable? Do we want to put this in writing? Do we, you know, like where do we want to memorialize this? And do we want to memorialize this? And who do we want in on this discussion? And I think, you know, 2 years down the line now, we've gotten very good at communicating in very appropriate, helpful ways that are making review of matters easier. I can see it. And it's not just because I'm 100 years old and I've been working forever. It's because, you know, we've been doing this now for 2 years. So we're starting to be able to look back at our work of 2 years and see we're working better. Our work files are cleaner over the last 2 years. They're not, I don't want to say, and this is not an FAA thing, it's not a Department of Homeland Security thing. I was in a couple of different agencies at the Department of Homeland Security. I was in the Office of General Counsel. It's a general thing. The last 2 years, I've seen all of the work product and work process change to be more precise. And I really do think it's because people have had to have real precision in their communication. So that's worth really thinking about and taking a look at for yourself and for your colleagues. Next slide. And I think the ultimate thing that we learned was that we as individuals, as professionals, we have all the value. The value followed us home. When all of a sudden we had to work at home, the value that we had, it came home with us. It's not like we came home and all our values stayed at our desks or in our office back at work. It came home with us. We really had the goods. We were the gold. And I think that made me, I know for me, it made me feel really good. All of a sudden I felt like, wow, this resume that I've been building over the years is a really good resume. And, you know, I hope there's no supervisors on the line or bosses on the line, but I'll just say that over the years, you know, there's all these jokes about, you know, I'm going to add this to my resume and my resume is going to sound so good. But the truth is that my resume is accurate and it really is an amazing resume because I've worked my butt off over the last several decades. And when I came home to work and it was just me, myself and I working on my caseload, my workload, I realized, wow, all the value is in me. I really built myself up as a great professional. And so I was proud of that. And I think that we should all kind of take a minute and think about what great professionals we became. We became such good professionals that we were able to take ourselves home and work alone and figure out how to do it. Next slide. Oh, okay. This is just a reminder that we should breathe. So, because that's going to be important for what's coming up. Okay. So how do we take this forward? Well, let's remember that we're each bringing, after this 2 years of kind of that weird new normal, we all are bringing forward a greater understanding of the factors that impact our workplace experience. And it's going to be different for each one of us. Some of us learned different things about our family, our children's education, our parents' needs, our family needs, our work needs, what was lacking in our professional development, what we wanted to do more of, what we wanted to do less of. Next slide, please. A lot of us, or most of us, or even all of us, understand now how we're most productive. I know in my professional group and in my friends group and in my family, we talked a ton about what made us work better and what was getting in our way, what was distracting, what was unproductive. Those were a lot of the conversations we've been having over the last 2 years. Next slide. All of us have a better understanding of our strengths and weaknesses. That's really, really clear. We've all gotten to know ourselves as professionals very well. Next slide. And we definitely all know our styles and preferences better. It's funny because in my family, we have several professionals working in the federal government. We all missed certain things about being at the office, and we all loved certain things about being at home. And for all of us, it was different. We're all a mixture of, some of us are severe, extreme introverts like me. Some of us are extreme extroverts like my brother and one of my sister-in-laws. And some of us, the rest of them are hybrids. They're kind of a combination of introvert, extrovert. So we all were excited and bummed about certain aspects of working at home, excited, bummed about certain aspects of the workplace, and, you know, all combinations of everything. So that was something that we learned over the last 2 years, and something that you got to think about. Next slide. And our interests at work, that was the other thing. I think that when you've been in the government for a long time, I think that you start doing a lot of things just as a matter of habit. You get involved in different activities, maybe just because you've always been expected to be involved in those activities. I think the last 2 years gave everybody a break. And now you can stop and think, what do I actually want to be involved in at work? Maybe I want to do more activities that are outside of my expertise, or maybe I want to build up my expertise more, or maybe I want to shift my expertise over to a related area. Those are all good questions, and now is the perfect time to start thinking about that and talking about that. Next slide. So basically, in coming back to the office, or to the hybrid office, or to the new normal, however you want to think about it, you basically have to get yourself thinking a different way. And the way to do that is by thinking a different way. It sounds redundant, but basically they used to call this, you know, change your attitude, bring the body and the mind will follow, all that kind of stuff. It really is, unfortunately, the truth. It's the only thing you can do. The only thing you can do to get yourself thinking a different way is by thinking a different way. So it's kind of the simple thing that's impossible to do. But let's talk about how we can do that. So the next slide says that we want to focus in this transition on minimizing stress so that we can maximize success. I know that sounds hokey, but if you think about it, it's really the formula that you want. You want to minimize your stress. And I'm not talking about just at work, at home and professionally. You want to minimize your stress on all fronts. And you want to be a successful, and I'm not talking about just on one level or another level, successful the way that you define it for yourself. It's a very personal thing. You want to maximize your success on all levels for yourself as much as you can. And hopefully for your team, for your department, for your agency, hopefully. Next slide. In order to do that, the first thing you need to do, and I know this is not easy for a lot of people, but you need to anticipate a favorable outcome. All of us need to say, this is going to be great. This new hybrid, new normal, whatever you want to call it, it's going to be great. And the reason it's going to be great is because we're all committed to it and we're going to make it great. And it might not be easy and it might not be obvious in the beginning, but we're going to do it, because we're going to figure out how to do it. Next slide. You got to be a proactive team member. The key words are proactive and team. You have to be part of the team. It's not you in a silo. It wasn't you in a silo when you were working at home these last 2 years. It was you figuring out how to be part of a team when you were working remotely. And now you have to be proactive. You can't wait to see what happens. If you wait to see what happens, then you have no say and no right to complain if it's not what works for you. If you want to get an environment that works for you, then you have to be proactive and help the environment to look like what you want it to look like. Next slide. You also need to abandon unhelpful routines and habits. It's the perfect time in your life to abandon unhelpful routines and habits. Take a look at what you're doing. And I know you've all heard this in a million different ways. If what you're doing is not getting the results you want, change what you're doing. So look at your results, look at what you're getting. If you want to get something different, look at what you're doing and change what you're doing. You hear it a million different ways. It's a really simple formula. This is the perfect time to do it. It's the perfect time. If you've always been bringing a smelly lunch and then you smell that smell all day and you're sick of smelling that smell all day, change the kind of lunch you bring. I mean, it's like so easy, but it's also easy to just be lazy about it and do what you've always been doing, you know? So I changed, speaking of lunch, I changed my eating when I was working at home because all of a sudden I had all the foods I enjoy right here. And so I was able to eat a lot healthier and a lot more according to my kind of clock, my personal clock. And I was more energetic during the day. I didn't get tired as much during the day. And so moving forward, I'm figuring out how to make that happen all the time because I wasn't yawning all day long. One of the big things I noticed is I don't yawn all day long when I'm eating better. So for me, that was a big win-win. So you want to like take a look. Next slide. Oh, remember to breathe. Just another reminder. For those of you who have Alexa, use Alexa. I have Alexa. Oh, she's going to ask me now. Is it okay? All right. I won't say her name again. But if you have her, then let her help you. I ask her to send me reminders and alerts to breathe, or I ask her to play a song throughout the day at certain times, or to remind me to stand up and stretch, to remind me to jump up and down a few times, you know, things like that. Remember throughout the day to wake yourself up. Okay, let's go to the next slide. We're almost in the home. We are in the home stretch. How do we manage our own stress after these 2 years of so much stress? You learn about it. Learn about stress. Read about it. Write about it. If you're a journaler, journal it. Talk about it. Talk about it with your boss, your colleagues, your coworkers, your family. Be aware of it. The worst thing you can do with stress is avoid it or ignore it, because stress doesn't go away. And anybody who's been through stress, which now we all have, so you can't say you've never been stressed out. We've all been through extreme stress right now. You can't ignore it. It doesn't go away. It takes its toll. So you might as well get into it. Find out everything you can about stress so you can figure out what impact it's having on you. Next slide. Inventory the stress in your life. Do a body check. What is it doing to your body, inside and outside? Do a mind check. What's it doing to you cognitively? Are you having cognitive issues? Are you thinking more slow or more with more difficulty? Are you having trouble pulling up words or thinking straight? Are you getting foggy? That's stress. That's stress. I mean, you might have also aged 20 years in the last 2 years because it was so stressful, but that's stress, and you can do things about that. Do an emotional check. Are you angrier than you used to be? Are you more emotional than you used to be? Are you more uptight than you used to be? Do an emotional check, figure it out, get some help. Do a balance check. Is your life out of balance? Try to figure out how to get it more in balance. There's lots of resources, and I'm going to point you towards some at the end. Next slide. And work with your stress. Anybody who has tried to deal with stress knows that you got to work with your stress. You cannot fight your stress. You've got to sit with it. If you believe in prayer, you've got to pray on it. You've got to accept it. You can't fight it. You've got to understand it. And understanding it means understanding how it affects you personally. We all react differently to stress. You have to connect with your stress, and you have to see what in your body, in your life, in your mind, stress connects to. Our stress connects all of us in different ways. Some of us feel it in our stomach. Some of us feel it in our head. Some of us feel it in our back. Some of us feel it because we can't sleep. Some of us can't eat. Figure out how the stress is connected to your body, your mind, your emotions. Don't bark, please. That's the dog. Release your stress. Figure out how to release your stress. Walk your stress out. Run your stress out. Read your stress out. Exercise your stress. Play it out. Go play volleyball. Play with your kids. Go jump up and down with balls. And I added working out because I'm an introvert and I love working. And they don't use the term workaholic anymore, but I'll cop to it. I'm a workaholic. I love working. And so that's one of the reasons I'm so good at having a cartoon and a comic strip, because I'm really good at having deadlines. And so at the end of my workday, I love switching to the drawing table and then drawing for a couple of hours. It's deadlines that I really enjoy meeting, because at the end of the day, I'm still a workaholic. And so being a workaholic enables me to manage my stress. And because it's a cartoon, I get to do it in a fun way that makes me laugh. Next slide. Last, make it reasonable. Make it reasonable. Make the stress reasonable. Break those big items into small items. Break those big tasks into little manageable tasks. Celebrate your small, frequent successes. Do it within the day. You just went to a session on stress. That's a success. Count your wins at the end of the day. You got out of bed. That's a win. You showered. That's a win. You got dressed. That's a win. And for anybody who really had a hard time over these last 2 years, you know that's a win. Some of us were depressed. Some of us were anxious. Some of us really had a hard time getting it together at the beginning of COVID, when things were really scary, or when people in our family got sick or worse. So count your wins, because every win is a win. Compartmentalize and don't catastrophize. And if you don't know what catastrophize means, make a point to look it up when you get back to your office. Next slide. Remember to expect hiccups. There's going to be hiccups. Remember to be patient, and remember that your colleagues are not robots. They are humans. So don't expect everything and everybody to be perfect right out of the gate, because that's not going to happen ever, ever, ever. Next slide. Just as an extra reminder, respect everybody. They're all making it through this crisis, just like you. Be caring and compassionate. Remember that people have experienced losses. I know that it has hit your department especially hard, and I'm sorry for that. Keep it in mind. It hurts every day. And just remember that everybody's life got turned upside down. And the last slide is a thank you for surviving this stressful beginning of a presentation today, but hopefully it got better as it went on. There's some information on there of how you can get in contact with me. If you go to my website, which is dailyd.com, there are many, many, many resources on how to manage stress. There are also resources on how to live your passion while also working full time. Increasingly, there are more resources on how to work toward retirement, even though you're a workaholic. And there are also a lot of resources on cartooning for those of you who are interested in that. And that's all I have to say. So bring on any questions that you might have, and I'll turn it over back to you guys.
Yes, thank you so much. This has been what I was hoping to learn from you, and so much more. And we really appreciate everything you've put into this presentation. I just kind of wanted to kick it off. We don't have a whole lot of time, but I wanted to ask you about how you are interfacing with your coworkers and your clients. And there's not only the taking care of ourself aspect of it, but learning to, like you said in your last slides, be respectful of and compassionate towards and understanding about how people are working differently. They've come through different experiences, and now we're reintegrating and trying to support our clients here at NASA by being willing to use different types of communication and learning new technologies, and even adjusting our time schedules to be able to meet people at times that are more convenient for them. How have you been sort of interfacing with your coworkers and your clients, and have you had any other functional changes or suggestions in that area?
Yeah, I think that there are three main tools that I've been using. I think the first tool that I've been using is to remember that every conversation is a discussion. So when I'm talking to somebody, whether it's a colleague or a client or a customer, I engage with them and I talk about, well, what are we trying to do here? What would be helpful to you? What do you want to get out of this? What works for you? I think what works for you is really a good question to keep asking, especially as you go through the process of working with somebody. I think especially because we've all just gone through this 2 years of COVID, and there have been so many disruptions and interruptions and changes. It's really helpful to just keep asking, what works for you? What works for you? So that the person knows it's not going to happen one way and that's it, and we're immovable. It's a discussion of how can we make this work, and what are you hoping will happen here, and how can we make that happen, and let's talk about it. I think the second thing is to remember that some people, or everyone even, need help transitioning to a new tool set. So a lot of people are not comfortable, or they think they're not comfortable with technology. I hear it all the time. People are not comfortable with Zoom, they're not comfortable with texting, they're not comfortable with email. What I've been doing is just giving little mini tutorials. I'll say, well, I know you're not comfortable with it. Let me just send you a little text, and I'm going to just show you how to respond to me. And I've been kind of just teaching people, let's just do a little practice Zoom. I just want to show you something on Zoom. And they'll be sharing a document with me, or Teams, or whatever you're using. They'll be sharing a document before they even realize they're using Teams. And then, you get to say, well, you just use Teams. See, it's not so hard. I think that it's helpful to let people see that by using programs, by showing them, by helping them see how things work, that things can work. I forgot what the third was. Everything's a discussion, that the tools, helping them use the tools. And then the third thing, I don't remember what the third thing was, but I'll probably remember in a minute.
No, that's some great feedback. I love the idea of sort of partnering with your clients and letting them help you through some of the technological stuff, and you can maybe help and give tutorials to them as well. I know that we're coming close on our time here, and if everybody would give, maybe turn on their cameras and give a round of applause to Donna, and just thank you so much for the time and the effort and everything that you have put forward today, because this really was what we needed to hear. And we are going to keep going. We've got lots of adventures ahead of us, and next month we're going to have a wonderful presentation from Cassandra Stovall. She is an exercise physiologist and precision nutrition coach, and she's going to talk to us a little bit about how to eat junk food and still be able to move. And we're just going to be exploring some simple ways that we're able to live within our diet and exercise lifestyle in ways that are maybe healthy for us without depriving us of the things we enjoy. So I just thank you all so much for your patience and your time today, and we look forward to seeing you again next month. Thank you all very much.